Discover the incredible moment a Marine and his K9 uncovered. 5 words that transformed everything. Jake Miller stood at the edge of the fog-choked lake, Max by his side, feeling the weight of his own existence in this small town. The restless memories of combat played in his mind like a broken record, each note a reminder of the lives he couldn't save. The brothers he lost. How had the familiar streets, once a source of comfort, become so alien? A single cool breeze brushed against his cheek, and he shivered, not from the cold, but from the ghosts that haunted him. Everywhere he turned, shadows lingered, memories clawing at him with suffocating insistence. Just a few more jobs, and I'll be fine, he mumbled to Max, though he heard the doubt creeping into his own words. Mowing lawns and fixing fences had always been simple work, comforting in its predictability. Yet now, each task felt like tread on quicksand. He found no grounding here. With every clipped blade of grass, he sensed the town had forgotten the sacrifice he made, not just of himself, but of every veteran who returned, unsure of where they belonged. Would they remember? Would they care? While volunteering at a veterans community service project, Jake found himself drawn to an elder, speaking with the weight of years etched into his face. The old man shared stories of resilience and commitment laced with a powerful revelation, 5 words that had altered paths of countless lives. "You've got to fight for it," the elder declared, and as the words hung in the air, a thunderclap crashed in Jake's mind. The dilemma tugged at him. Should he fight for recognition, for a cause larger than himself, or stay loyal to the family name, content to remain an afterthought? Jake's heart raced. He felt the familiar pang of anxiety knotted in his gut. Could he become the man others expect him to be? What if doing so meant losing himself? Unsure, he returned home, stifled creativity clawing against his chest. Among piles of forgotten memories, he stumbled upon his grandfather's old journal. The ink-stained pages spilled wisdom, lessons on love and honor, and resilience. Each word ignited a spark of familiarity, as if invoking a part of himself he'd thought was extinguished long ago. But just as clarity began to dawn amid the gathering storm, news reached him that sent a shockwave through his heart. The initiative aimed at assisting returning soldiers had become a target for budget cuts. The injustice burned through him, awakening something he thought he'd buried in combat. With the elder's words echoing in his mind, the possibility began to crystallize. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for every veteran who was struggling. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. A determination coursed through him, fierce and unyielding. But then, fate threw in its cruel twist. An old friend, lost to their own battles, reached out, desperation filling their voice like shards of glass. They needed help, but Jake felt the pull of the initiative wane under his grasp. Torn between his newfound drive to fight for veterans and the haunting fear of failing a friend spiraling into darkness, he stood on the precipice of an impossible choice. With Max watching, brow furrowed in concern, Jake felt the weight of sacrifice pressing on him, a culmination of fear and courage merging into a single, daunting question. Could he be the anchor his friend needed, even as his own ship threatened to capsize? As he surveyed the foggy town that felt increasingly foreign, he realized that vulnerability might be the axis upon which everything turned. The 2 paths stretched before him, each shrouded in uncertainty, but one hope lingered. Could he find strength in connection? And would that glimpse of hope be enough to stitch together the fabric of his own shattered existence? The days blended into a haze of uncertainty as Jake wrestled with his decision. Each passing hour weighed heavily, like a relentless tide that pulled him deeper into a sea of doubt. The fog-shrouded lake morphed into a reflection of his internal turmoil. He felt trapped between his duty to his friend and the silent calling to advocate for veterans. Conversation with Max became the only consistent anchor in this chaotic emotional storm. "Which way do we go, boy?" he murmured one afternoon, throwing a stick into the water. Max bounded after it without hesitation, enthusiasm contrasting sharply against Jake's heavy heart. The simplicity of Max's loyalty reminded him of what it meant to be fixed on a purpose. He wondered if he could discover a similar resolve. The capital letters of duty loomed large in his mind, and for the first time, it dawned on him that duty wasn't merely about sacrifice. It was about embracing responsibility in the face of fear. Days turned into a week, and the weight of his old friend's plea continued to haunt him. Each moment spent honing his resolve to act for the veterans felt like betrayal, a transgression of the bonds he shared with those who had fought alongside him. In the stillness of the night, Jake felt the call of his old life calling out, memories creeping through the shadows. Tension settled deep in his chest as he realized he had to confront these uncomfortable emotions head-on. There was no escaping his past. He could only learn to navigate through it. In the quiet of his home, he pulled out the journal again, flipping through the pages filled with his grandfather's insights. Hidden in the ink were pieces of history, struggles that mirrored his own. His fingers brushed across a passage that caught his eye. In true dark moments, courage is not the absence of fear, but the determination to perseverate. A fire ignited within him, the words resonating through every fiber of his being. Stepping outside, he drew a breath as crisp autumn air filled his lungs. The vibrant colors of the turning leaves flickered like embers of hope. Jake called Max, determination swelling in his chest. Today he would take action, not just for his friend, but for all those who felt the sting of abandonment in silence. He couldn't change the course set by budget cuts, but he could make a stand that would honor not only his struggles, but also the struggles of countless veterans. Before he could second-guess himself, he pulled out his phone, fingers poised over the screen. He decided to reach out to his old friends from the service, individuals who understood the distinct weight of loss and renewal. They shared bonds forged under fire, and now Jake sent them a call to unify, a mission driven by the very essence of survival they all embraced. As the sun dipped below the horizon, a new flame of purpose lit his path. Plans began to churn. Words formed within him that had once been trapped. He would rise, not just as a soldier, but as a soldier who fights for those at risk of being forgotten. In the face of failure, he would choose accountability, sowing seeds of hope in his community. But just as clarity began to settle, an unexpected notification buzzed through, pulling Jake from his thoughts. The urgency in the message sent a chill down his spine, sweeping away the moment he had hoped to share with the memories of camaraderie. It was a notification from a local newspaper seeking comment on the budget cuts, an invitation to speak out. This could be his moment, the platform he needed to elevate voices he once thought lost. And then he paused, heart hammering, a realization washing over him. This wasn't just about veterans anymore. It was about him. Would he have the courage to face the scrutiny that lay ahead? Would his voice resonate amidst the noise, or would it be drowned out in fear? Every insecurity bubbled to the surface, a maelstrom of emotions swirling within him, demanding to be released. Standing outside, with night creeping closer, and Max nudging his hand as if sensing the gravity of the moment, Jake wondered if he truly had what it took to confront this challenge. "This is it, isn't it?" he whispered, resolve entwining with fear. The decision was clear. To take that step into the unknown might just lead him back to himself, or plunge him deeper into uncertainty. He inhaled deeply, readying himself for the fight ahead. The moment of truth had arrived, and it was time to decide once and for all if he could transform that burning pressure in his chest into a rallying cry. Could he step onto the path, one that challenges everything about who he is? The answer was brewing beyond him, and he could feel it stirring, a storm of possibilities waiting to be unleashed. Jake stood there, heart racing as the cold night air pricked at his skin. The flickering streetlight cast elongated shadows that danced around him, a stark reminder of the choices that loomed ahead. He had cradled that notification like a fragile bird, now teetering on the brink of flight or free fall. Taking action beyond the confines of his guarded self was necessary. Speaking publicly felt like stretching elastic bands a bit too far. Yet, in the depths of his apprehension, there was an undeniable push, a force igniting the embers of his resolve. "Is this really what you want?" he mused outward, half conversing with Max, who leaned against him, head cocked curiously. Just then, the phone buzzed again, a reminder that time was slipping away. He was being pulled back, no longer a passive observer in life's narrative. As he clicked on the message, fear skittered through him like a winter breeze. What could he say to whoever was listening? Each word he planned drew a vivid picture of his internal struggle. He envisioned himself on that stage, voice trembling, emotions raw. Just as quickly, another image swirled. His comrades, their faces worn and gaunt, the burdens they bore as palpable as the heavy gear they once wore. If they could withstand hell, how could he falter in front of a crowd? Jake knew this moment would demand more than he had ever given. Each battle they had won together had forged their identities in a crucible of fire, and now it was his turn to rise, pen in hand. Suddenly, everything felt at stake. This was both a calling and a monumental challenge. He stepped back into the house, aiming for the desk that had gathered dust from disuse. It wasn't just about veterans or budget cuts. This was personal. Digging through old papers, he found a notepad marred with ink smudges and fleeting ideas. With his pen, he began to draft thoughts that poured out unfiltered. The words flowed about the silent struggles of veterans, the sacrifices made, and the responsibilities that each individual had, not just to serve, but to uplift one another. As he wrote, Jake rediscovered the core of who he was, relentless. Fueled by the desire to connect and empower, he crafted his narrative, transparency offering strength where insecurity once thrived. He would not only divulge anger over resource cuts, he would stand as a testament against the silence that suffocated so many. The darkened room illuminated only by the pale glow of his laptop screen. Time became irrelevant. Fueled by adrenaline and purpose, he finally reached a conclusion to his narrative. Together, we can change the tide. It echoed internally, ricocheting off the walls of doubt he'd carried. He pressed send, releasing his words into an unknown. For a moment, silence enveloped him. Max brushed against his leg, grounding his racing thoughts. Then, warmth surged, unveiling a sense of autonomy. He wasn't merely a soldier anymore. He was an advocate. This action was an embrace of life, an acceptance of the struggle. A call to arms of a different kind. Yet as the initial rush subsided, trepidation settled back in. Had he crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed? What reaction awaited? Jake pondered how his peers, both allies and adversaries, would perceive his newfound courage. Would they rise to join him, or would they turn away, reinforcing the very silence he sought to disrupt? Lost in contemplation, he pulled his fingers through his hair, a gesture both familiar and emblematic of anxiety. This was only the beginning. The next step lingered just beyond his reach, a lingering specter of uncertainty. And then the phone buzzed again. Another notification from the newspaper. The editor wanted to discuss his submission. This was not just an invitation for dialogue, it was a potential reckoning. Jake turned pale at the prospect of what would unfold. Could he harness this moment effectively? The stakes had shifted dramatically. The next chapter awaited him, shrouded in the mystery of what the conversation might unveil. Would discussion steer him towards transformation, or would they lay bare his vulnerabilities for all to see? Only one certainty remained. Jake was now on a path from which there would be no return. As Jake sat on the edge of his bed, the weight of the anticipated phone call pressed against his chest. He could hear the faint ticking of the clock, each second dragging into the next, as if trying to coax him into stillness. The uncertainty coiled tight in his throat, and he wondered if he was truly prepared for whatever lay ahead. He had cultivated the courage to put his thoughts to paper, but the thought of speaking them aloud filled him with a new kind of dread. What if he stumbled over his words? What if the fiery passion he felt while writing vanished in the face of real conversation? He closed his eyes, envisioning the faces of his comrades, those who had stood shoulder to shoulder with him in the darkest moments. They had fought through trauma and recovery together. If they could unite against adversity, surely he could find his voice. Jake's phone buzzed yet again, jolting him back to the present. He took a deep breath, trying to center himself and stave off panic. The editor's name flashed on the screen and he hesitated. There was no turning back now. He picked up the call, his voice low, almost unrecognizable as he attempted to mask the tremor within. "Hello? Jake, this is Allison from the newspaper," a confident voice replied. "I read your submission, and I found it compelling. I'd like to discuss it further if you have a moment." Her tone held a blend of professionalism and encouragement, and it struck a chord deep within him. "Sure, I have time," he stuttered, forcing himself to focus on her words rather than the raging thoughts in his mind. The conversation drifted easily, like a river finding its path. They discussed the themes he presented, and she probed deeper, asking questions that demanded he articulate his feelings. Why did he feel driven to share the burden of veterans' struggles? What personal experiences shaped his resolve to advocate for change? Each inquiry felt like a gentle challenge, peeling back his layers. It was an effort to find clarity, and with every question, he unearthed pieces of his story, binding them into a coherent narrative. "I feel like we're often reduced to statistics," he explained, gaining momentum. "But underneath those numbers are lives filled with hardships and triumphs. We can't forget that." Allison listened attentively, her silence punctuated only by thoughtful nods. There was a moment of stillness. Then she spoke again. "Jake, have you considered the impact that speaking publicly could have? You'd be giving a voice not just to your experience, but to countless others." The prospect was both thrilling and terrifying. Could he stand before an audience and lay bare his vulnerabilities? The old echoes of self-doubt surfaced, but he pushed back. This wasn't merely about him. It was about exposing the reality that too many veterans faced alone. "I want to," he replied hesitantly, determination threading through his voice. "But I'm afraid of failing." "Fear is natural," she reassured, "but it's also a powerful motivator. Look at what you've accomplished already by submitting your piece. It's a leap, but maybe it's time to embrace the fear, to own it." Her words lingered, causing ripples within him. This wasn't simply about sharing his story, it was an opportunity to enact change, to confront the silence he had long battled. A possibility crystallized in his mind, sparking excitement and uncertainty in equal measure. At that moment Jake felt different, alive with energy and purpose. He realized that he had a decision to make, to let that fear dictate his actions, or to transform it into something that could inspire others. As the call drew to a close, Allison left him with a thoughtful challenge. "Think about how you want to approach this. The world is eager for your words, Jake." After they hung up, he held the phone tightly, staring into the dark corners of his room, wrestling with the implications of what was being asked of him. His mind buzzed with possibilities and obstacles alike. But Jake also recognized that this was not just about a conversation. It was a pivot point in his journey. The path toward transformation would demand more of him than ever before, leading him toward the precipice of not just his own fears, but of vulnerability itself. As he settled onto the bed, another thought struck him, one that spiraled through his mind. What if he could convey the power of his emotions not just through writing, but through a public platform? Could he summon the strength needed to face that moment of truth? The excitement warred with anxiety inside him, igniting a spark of determination. Jake's heart raced again, but this time with the thrill of potential. Would he finally step beyond his limits, or would he allow doubt to reclaim its grip? Either way, a new chapter awaited, a test not just of his resolve, but of his very identity. The urgency surged within him, marking the beginning of a critical transformation. As he pondered his next moves, a deeper fear unearthed itself. The prospect that he might discover something about himself that he had never wanted to confront. This journey would reveal more than he expected, and deep inside, he sensed the weight of truth waiting to be unmasked. Jake paced the dimly lit room, the gravity of his aspirations pressing heavily on him. He needed a plan. The prospect of public speaking loomed like a vast ocean before him, both a terrifying plunge and a wondrous expanse of potential. His first instinct was to retreat, to let fear dictate his path, but now was the time to confront that instinct head-on. An ember of relentless determination flickered in his chest, He opened his laptop and started typing furiously, each keystroke a commitment to himself. He recalled the discussions with Allison, the resolute encouragement in her voice igniting a fire inside. What could he say? How could he weave together the threads of his experience into something that would resonate with others? Rethinking his narrative became an exercise in courage, assembling memories and struggles into a coherent tapestry, brightened by glimmers of hope. The screen glowed innocently, but it felt like a reflection of him, bare, vulnerable, yet pregnant with possibility. In his earlier drafts, he had focused on the hardest moments, the shadows that clung to him. Now, he began to explore the light, the community he had found in recovery, the fights fought not only against his demons but alongside others. As he typed, he began to embrace the duality of his experience, the mourning of lost comrades intermingled with the joy of cherishing the living. Jake's fingers flew over the keys, forming a bridge between his past and his potential future. He drew strength from stories shared with fellow veterans who had transformed their struggles into a guiding force. These anecdotes became the backbone of his narrative, framing a powerful message about resilience, shared pain, and the profound impact of vulnerability. Yet self-doubt lurked, whispering its familiar refrain. What right did he have to speak for others? Would his words carry enough weight to instigate change? He paused, fingers hovering above the keyboard. It was time to confront that inner critic, not by silencing it but by integrating its message. It reminded him of the responsibility he bore. Speaking was not just a privilege, but an homage to the stories that went unheard. Maybe it was okay not to have all the answers, as long as he remained true to his journey. He recalled the undeniable bond shared with K9, his ever-loyal companion, who had been by his side through thick and thin. Naming that connection became imperative. The thought of sharing that experience, how their unspoken communication pushed both of them on a path of healing, made his heart race with anticipation. Together, they would face the audience, a united front. With renewed resolve, Jake decided not only to capture his story in words, but to find a way to represent the authenticity of his emotional battles. Realizing that he could incorporate his relationship with his dog into his message empowered him further. Their bond symbolized comfort and survival, embodying the essence of companionship that veterans longed for. The following days cascaded into a blur of preparation. Jake practiced his speech relentlessly, each cycle building his confidence. Standing in front of the mirror became a sentimental ritual, where he found himself moving beyond mere words. He gestured, expressed, visualized the faces of those who would listen. Each rehearsal mirrored the atmosphere he must create, a space where vulnerability thrived as strength. As he honed his message, a crucial thought took shape. The words he chose not only served his story, but also carried the weight of countless others. His passion blossomed into a responsibility that filled him with both pride and trepidation. Would he be able to convey the depth of his emotions while anchoring the essence of that lived experience? Just as he thought he was finding his footing, another obstacle emerged, a looming event where he was to present. The date approached with almost painful rapidity, and each tick of the clock amplified the anticipation and tension within him. Would he trust his voice to transcend the fear? Could he ensure that those who shared their experiences would feel represented? The night before the presentation, he performed his speech once more, but this time, he glimpsed a final revelation in himself. He understood that this journey, rooted in fear and uncertainty, was an initiation into bravery and self-discovery. He summoned every ounce of courage, recognizing this moment was not purely about him. It was about catalyzing a connection that had the potential to shift perspectives. As he fell asleep that night, dreams intermingled with the final outlines of his speech. Would he unveil the true impact of his words, or would anxiety consume him in that pivotal moment? The intriguing paradox of performance lingered, the fear of exposure, and the thrill of potential success swirled together, beckoning him toward the dawn of new beginnings. Little did he know, the true test awaited not just in delivering his words, but in a realization that loomed tantalizingly close. He would not merely speak about transformation, he'd become part of it, in ways he had yet to comprehend. The day would dawn, and with it, a challenge that would reshape everything he thought he knew about himself. As dawn broke, Jake awoke to a pitiful tremor of anxiety settling in his stomach. The early morning light streamed through the window, illuminating his thoughts in stark clarity. Today was not just another day. Today was the culmination of weeks of meticulous preparation and emotional upheaval. He could feel the weight of expectation pressing against his chest, a dual force of hope and dread intertwining into an inescapable knot. He rose and moved through his routine mechanically, each action both grounding him and amplifying his unease. K9 whined softly, sensing the shift in energy. Jake knelt beside the dog, the familiar weight of his companion bringing forth a surge of comfort. As he scratched behind K9's ears, he reflected on their symbiotic journey. In moments of chaos, K9 had remained steadfast, a living reminder that loyalty thrived amidst turmoil. Jake's heart raced. They were a team, forged through shared experiences that words alone could scarcely capture. Would his attempt to convey their bond resonate with others? Or would it simply fall flat, muffled beneath insidious waves of doubt? He questioned whether he could encapsulate their connection within the confines of a speech. 5 minutes to unravel lives intricately knotted together by trauma and healing. His preparation transformed once more. Sitting with K9, he began to outline not just the narrative of his experiences, but the flow of connection between them, a spontaneous chain of affection that had propelled Jake through his darkest moments. He remembered vividly their first day together, the uncertainty lurking in K9's eyes, mirroring Jake's own. As their paths converged, they learned to trust each other. No words exchanged, just mutual reassurance. It was this core essence of communication, beyond mere words, that he wanted to convey. As the clock ticked forward, Jake visualized the room where he would speak. He imagined the gathering of veterans, some faces familiar and others shrouded in anonymity. What stories were they holding back? What wounds were left unaddressed? Breathing deeply, he closed his eyes and pictured sharing the 5 words that had emerged from his recent reflections. Words that had transformed his approach to vulnerability. I am not alone anymore. The revelation surged within him, empowering his spirit. Those words encapsulated more than his personal healing. They expressed a universal truth, an assurance that resonated within every struggle. It was time to express not just his journey, but to illuminate a path for others feeling isolated in their pain. He envisioned each veteran within that audience, grappling with their own shadows, and offered the promise of connection and hope through his voice. With time rapidly slipping away, Jake shifted focus to executing his speech. Standing tall in front of the mirror, he practiced the delivery, not just of words, but of emotions. Each repetition solidified his message, embedding those 5 pivotal words inside his mind like a mantra. They became more than a phrase, they became a bridge to understanding and healing, woven into the fabric of his story. Yet, beneath that resolve, an undercurrent of doubt persisted. What if his message lacked the magic required to spark a change? What if he faltered, rendering his intimate revelations impotent under the scrutiny of an audience? In that moment of introspection, the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on his shoulders. He remembered what had driven him this far, the understanding of being a vessel for others' voices. Finally, he donned his jacket, K9's instinctual nudges offering that last semblance of affirmation. It was time to step into the world outside, ready to embrace whatever awaited him. The car ride felt surreal, every passing moment stark in contrast to his usual routines. He silently repeated those 5 words within himself, finding a rhythm, a heartbeat. As he arrived at the venue, the world grew quiet around him. Jake's resolve solidified. He could feel the connection between past and future coalescing in this moment. With K9 by his side, he knew he was entering something transformative, a chance to break chains and shatter silence. The stage glimmered under the harsh lights. Attendees murmured in anticipation. Jake took a breath, steeled himself, and gazed down at K9. Together they would face this uncharted territory. It was time to not only share their journey, but to reveal the profound power of vulnerability, the sanctity of connection. Little did he know that the true journey was yet to begin, as the moment he stepped onto the stage would unveil startling new dimensions of his strength. The audience awaited, but so did an unexpected twist that threatened to challenge everything he believed about himself and his voice. As Jake stepped onto the stage, a spotlight enveloped him in its harsh embrace. The light felt like a spotlight on a raw nerve, illuminating the fears he had grappled with in silence. He took a deep breath, K9's reassuring presence by his side, and caught sight of the audience. The sea of faces blurred together, but he recognized the flickers of anticipation, skepticism, and perhaps even hope reflected back at him. His heart raced, pounding out a tempo that matched the frantic drumming of thoughts in his head. What if he stumbled? Would the confessions he planned to share deconstruct him further, expose wounds not yet healed? Briefly, he considered retreating, running from this moment that demanded every ounce of courage he could muster. But the rooted strength of K9 at his heel was a reminder that retreat wasn't an option. He opened his mouth to speak, but the first words stuck in his throat. Silence filled the space around him, punctuated only by K9's soft panting. A bead of sweat trickled down his brow. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about every individual whose silence had grown deafening, every soul that felt trapped in their own narrative. "Good morning," he finally managed, the words finally breaking free. He scanned the audience, allowing his gaze to linger on individuals that seemed lost in their own shadows. "My name is Jake, and this," he gestured to K9. "This is my partner, my best friend." He could see interest sparking in their eyes, a ripple of connection initiated. As he began to narrate their story, how they found each other on the battlefield, how K9 had pulled him from the brink of despair, Jake felt something shift within him. The more he spoke, the more the anxiety morphed into urgency, each anecdote revealing layers of resilience buried deep. The warmth of shared memories began to diffuse the chill of doubt, illuminating the room like the dawn that had been so present just hours before. However, he wasn't prepared for the wave of vulnerability that crashed over him while recounting the moments in which K9 had become a lifeline. Each shared experience urged him to push against the boundaries of his comfort. "When I hit rock bottom, he was the one who taught me the most important lesson of all. I am not alone anymore." The words hung in the air, potent and raw. He could hear a collective intake of breath, witnesses to their journey toward healing. Faces softened, brows unknotted, and Jake felt the walls separating him from them erode with each syllable. The message transcended his personal story and began to resonate on a collective level, tapping into an essential truth shared among many veterans grappling with isolation. But as he stood there, caught in between narrative and reality, he sensed an unexpected shift in the energy of the room. A figure in the back began to stand, a wave of tension rippling forward as silent voices transformed into a reluctant chorus of murmurs. What he couldn't have anticipated unfolded before him. A familiar face roiling with pain and regret, eyes glistening with unspent tears. An old comrade, someone from his past that had once been entwined in the chaos of war. Jake's heart sank into an amalgam of recognition and apprehension. What would this confrontation reveal? Did their history hold the power to sabotage his hard-won moment of connection? The unexpected twist demanded an immediate response, forcing him to reevaluate everything he thought he knew about courage, vulnerability, and forgiveness. Could he confront his past while still holding on to the message that had begun to resonate so powerfully? "Hold on," he thought, the weight of the moment pressing him like an unyielding tide. Perhaps this was the real test of his strength, an opportunity not just to share, but to dissect the very barriers that defined him. The audience awaited, as did the man rising from the shadows of a troubled past. Jake inhaled deeply, ready to engage, because in that instant, he recognized the truth. Healing was not just about sharing, but also embracing the confrontation that led to transformation. Jake's gaze locked onto the figure advancing toward him, each step resonating through the silence like a drum echoing through the halls of his memory. He could feel a part of him resisting, a deep-seated instinct to shield himself from the pain that this encounter could unleash. But he hadn't come this far to retreat. He'd risen from the depths of despair, and now he had to face whatever ghosts lingered in the wake of that journey. As the figure drew closer, dread twisted in Jake's stomach. His thoughts raced. He questioned whether he was ready for this dialogue. The years had blurred the pain, but now, Standing under the harsh spotlight, the shadows of their shared battles flickered to life. Could he muster the courage to name what had gone wrong, to acknowledge the fractures that lay in their relationship? "Jake," the man's voice broke through the fog, gruff and uncertain. "I never thought I'd see you here." A moment stretched between them, heavy, swollen with unsaid words, anger, and regret. This was not merely a reunion. It was a confrontation with everything he had been trying to heal. Truth and consequence wrestled within him. He had learned that healing wasn't linear, but a labyrinth, and maybe this was an opportunity to navigate through one of its hardest twists. "I didn't expect to see you either, Tom," Jake responded, his voice steadier than he felt. Recognition flickered in Tom's eyes, but it was chased away by something darker: guilt. I didn't mean to leave you like that," Tom stammered, the words tumbling out like stones dropped into a chasm. "Back in Afghanistan, I thought we'd get through it together. You were the best of us." Jake felt a heat rise within him, a mix of anger and obligation. The alluring compulsion to protect his own reality warred against the need to forgive, and the need to be forgiven. "But you didn't stay. When it mattered, you ran." The harshness of the words hung heavy in the air, palpable and tangible. Was he right to confront Tom publicly? Yet this wasn't merely a stage. It was a vulnerable space built on shared experiences, complexities, and the need to dismantle the silence they both had lived in. Tom's shoulders sagged as he absorbed Jake's hurt, and for the first time, the familiar mask of bravado faded. "I thought about you every day. I had demons that chased me. I should have fought harder. For you." Each admission cracked open a door to buried pain. The vulnerability that coursed between them was electric, its potency charged with the weight of years lost to misunderstanding. In that moment, Jake understood that acceptance did not mean erasing the past. It meant standing in the light with it. "And I had demons too," Jake admitted. His voice was softer now, the urgency pulsating with resonance rather than accusation. "But it's not just about what happened. I'm not here to settle scores. I'm here to understand." Tom's eyes shimmered with a complex array of emotions: shame, gratitude, and the possibility of redemption. Jake watched as Tom seemed to reshape before him, the lines of regret etching into something that resembled hope. In that charged interaction, something explosive occurred. Jake felt fragments of his hardened heart quaking, softening against the gravity of their shared past. This was not merely about him anymore. It was about confronting their collective suffering, about redefining what it meant to heal through shared truths. "We are more than our scars, Tom," Jake said, and in that moment, he became aware of his own potential for forgiveness. Could his willingness to explore this painful dialogue lead to both their transformations? The audience remained silent witnesses, holding their breath as the currents of emotion swelled around the stage. It was no longer just Jake's journey. It became theirs too, an exploration of connection, bravery, and the audacity to face deep-seated wounds together. As he turned to the audience, something unmistakable flickered in his chest, a fragile yet burgeoning sense of empowerment. But with the confrontation felt, new questions surged within him. Could this moment of acceptance extend beyond the stage? Beyond resolving their past, could they craft a path toward a shared understanding that could guide their futures? The room pulsed with transformative energy as he realized the weight of this newfound potential. Excitement mingled with trepidation as Jake stepped further into uncharted territory. The moment was merely the beginning of a greater struggle, not just to forgive, but to redefine what it means to move forward, together. And as he opened his mouth to speak, Jake felt the swell of possibility envelop him, igniting a new wave of vulnerability, one that held the power to reshape not only his destiny, but Tom's as well. What he didn't know was how far this journey would take him, as they dared to dissect everything that had been left unsaid. The silence that enveloped Jake hung like a thick fog, one that threatened to suffocate or illuminate. As he contemplated his next words, within him surged a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. The audience, their faces a blur of anticipation and investment, seemed to magnify his vulnerability, both a witness and a participant in this emotional excavation. "Tom," Jake finally said, the weight of those 4 letters feeling heavier than the entire conversation. What do we do now? His question lingered, echoing into the space where hope and uncertainty intertwined. Tom's expression shifted, the shadows of his past wrestling against the light of possibility. "I don't know," he admitted, a tremor of sincerity lining his voice. "But we can't stay here forever, can we?" "I can't." "Can you?" Resilience flickered to life within Jake, igniting something deep and dormant. Confronting Tom had hurt, but now, in their shared admission, an unexpected strength emerged. They were not just survivors of their past, they were architects of their future, empowered by the rawness of their pain. "What if we don't just move on? What if we move forward?" Jake proposed, bravely clinging to the glimmer of hope that had ignited in the fissures of their exchange. "Together." Tom's brow furrowed as he considered Jake's proposition. The idea of working together felt daunting. The mental walls erected from years of resentment and disappointment felt like handcuffs, each twist in his mind a reminder of the times he had failed to stand by Jake. "But how?" Tom questioned, a card of doubt flipping over in his hands. "What can 2 people like us really do to fix what's been broken?" Jake felt the surge of determination swirling again within him. "We begin with a single promise, a commitment to be honest with each other, to acknowledge our pain, but not let it define us." The outpouring internally galvanized Jake, presenting a striking revelation. He had the power to foster not just individual healing but mutual understanding. The thought swirled with intensity, a cocktail of urgency and possibility. Could vulnerability be the bridge, a path from despair to growth? "But I can't," Tom interrupted, his voice tight. "You can," Jake interjected, meeting Tom's gaze. "We can, together. Starting today, we share our stories, our truths, unfiltered. We hold nothing back." A pause settled over them, pregnant with vulnerability. Jake felt the quake of his resolve, the reality of this promise sending collateral ripples through his spirit. What could that raw honesty ignite? Could it shatter ceilings they had long constructed? Tom's features softened, as if a glimmer of remembrance sparked in him. Their camaraderie, the laughter and tears, made it real again. "So this isn't just about forgiveness, it's about redefining us." "Exactly," Jake affirmed, the adrenaline of connection racing through him. For a moment, Jake recognized a familiar camaraderie in Tom's eyes. Not a ghost of their past, but a flicker of potential that had lain dormant. It was an ember, cracking softly against the shadows that had long concealed joy. Stepping further into the dialogue, Jake envisioned their future, navigating uncharted waters, laying down burdens that had steered their lives. There was a heaviness of responsibility, but also an exhilarating rush of ambition. The unspoken histories between them would allow for a fruitful collaboration. Together they could become something entirely new, something that transcended their past failures. As thoughts converged into a resolute plan, Jake asked with quiet urgency, "What if we made this commitment public? Talk about it openly." A wave of anxiety crashed over him. What had once felt like a benevolent idea now posed an overwhelming risk. But the thought of retreating seemed worse. He saw Tom hesitate, doubt creeping back, the very thing he had battled through his own emotional landscape. "Are we ready for that?" Tom whispered, pulling Jake back from the brink of ambition rushing forth. Jake took a breath, allowing the weight of the question to anchor him. Maybe it's not about being ready. Maybe it's about taking that leap of faith together. The tension thrummed in the air, each man wrestling with what lay ahead. Did they truly possess the courage to unearth their truths before countless eyes? Jake could feel the pulse of uncertainty and exhilaration mingle as he took one step closer. This was their ambitious leap into the unknown, with every heartbeat echoing the shallow pain and bright potential. As they stood at the precipice of transformation, a question lingered just beyond the edge. What revelations waited to be born from the fires of shared vulnerability? What inner strength would they uncover next? And how would it echo in their lives beyond this moment? In the aftermath of the presentation, Jake stood off stage, adrenaline coursing through him, his heart still racing with exhilaration, urgency, and an inkling of fear. The audience, full of veterans and onlookers, had responded profoundly to his journey. The echoes of their silence fell like a gentle rain, soothing the raw edges of vulnerability exposed in his historic confrontation with Tom. He reserved a moment to savor the seismic shift brewing between him and Tom. They weren't just two men revisiting a shared past. They were emerging as champions of resilience, architects of their futures, and beacons for those yearning for reconnection. With newfound clarity, Jake realized that this wasn't merely about forgiveness. It was about forging a new narrative grounded in honesty and mutual understanding. Days flowed into weeks after the presentation, and the lives surrounding Jake began to pivot. He and Tom initiated regular conversations, often sitting in coffee shops where the aroma of fresh brewed coffee swirled around them like warmth. Each dialogue peeled away layers of discomfort, revealing illuminating truths. They exchanged experiences, vulnerabilities, and realizations about the war's aftermath, while building a roadmap for advocating on behalf of fellow veterans. Jake took the lead, arranging community forums to amplify their shared mission. They welcomed veterans and their families, giving them a platform to voice their experiences and connecting through shared struggles. Each event sparked a fire, chip by chip, breaking down the walls of silence that had whispered too long within their hearts and minds. One afternoon, as Jake presented the importance of these dialogues, he caught sight of a familiar face in the audience. A young veteran, cheeks still stained with the remnants of tears, shadowed by an overwhelming heaviness. The resonance of longing for connection hung between them like an embrace. Jake recognized the vulnerability in those eyes. The moment mirrored his own battles. Together they forged ground that promised healing. After the event, Jake actively reached out. "Hey there. I saw you were really moved today," he said softly, extending a hand across the table. The veteran, James, nodded slowly, the weight of unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. I want to say thank you. This was the first time I felt understood." Jake's breath caught for a moment. The significance of that acknowledgement sank into him like a seed growing roots. "That's what we hope for. Connection," he replied, realization dawning about the crucial role he would play in fostering this burgeoning community. "Together we can shift the narrative." Maybe it was a small victory, but the ripple effect of such moments filled Jake with a profound sense of purpose, a growing affirmation that they were not alone. Empowering, each voice crescendoed into a collective awakening that began to slice through the pervasive darkness of isolation. Weeks turned into months, and the impact piled upon their shared mission. Jake and Tom organized workshops on mental health resources, driving caterers to provide nourishing foods at events, forging partnerships with local therapists to emphasize accessible care tailored for veterans. They spun a web of support that began stitching together fragmented lives seeking healing. Feedback surged. Stories of connection echoed through the community. Each testimonial unveiled the importance of holding space for one another. Amidst this momentum, recognition surfaced organically. The local newspaper began highlighting their work, and Jake received an invitation to share their methods on a national veteran assistance program. It felt surreal, a golden thread woven through the fabric of their struggles that now blossomed into recognition and impact that they had previously only envisioned. At the event, standing at the podium with a palpable buzz of excitement filling the air, Jake felt an acute awareness of every step that had led him there. Months prior, he had stood at the edge of uncertainty, teetering between two lives. Now, he had ascended into purpose. Accompanied by Tom, they shared their journey boldly, illustrating the immense power in vulnerability, advocacy, and interconnection. "So here we stand, not just as survivors, but as connectors of lives yet untold," he said, voice resounding through the hall. The resounding applause from the audience enveloped him, affirming that this transformation was real, that the ripple he and Tom had initiated would morph into waves of invigorating hope and healing. After stepping down from the stage, Jake found himself enveloped in congratulatory handshakes. He was recognized not just as a soldier, but as an advocate, a voice for change, one that had defined his very essence. In those fleeting seconds, Jake closed a chapter of uncertainty and opened a book ripe with the promise of what was yet to come. K9, ever a companion, nudged his leg. An unspoken understanding passed between them. They had come so far, yet the journey had only begun. Each connection they forged held an extraordinary weight, a testament to resilience, empathy, and the willingness to confront their truths together. And in that insight, as Jake inhaled deeply of the sweet air, he realized he was not merely a character overcoming his struggles. He had become a catalyst for transforming lives like his own. Each step resonated with reverberations of triumph. Jake had conquered the countless layers of grief and doubt, demonstrating resilience that would continue to inspire others. Jake took a decisive step forward, shoulders back, head high. There was no more looking back. Instead, endless horizons beckoned, rife with the promise of advocacy and connection that would carve pathways for veterans wrestling with their own vulnerabilities. Jake was not just ready to embrace this new chapter, he was ready to lead. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. True fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.